Hi everybody, and welcome to my Perler beats tutorial on ironing techniques and styles. For this tutorial I have decided to make a red mushroom and a green mushroom from Super Mario, so that we can compare the two main ironing styles out there. Before talking about ironing, I'll show you a useful trick to reposition your sprites on a single pegboard. If you'd like to skip to the ironing section, click the time tags on the description of this video. The reason why I decided to show you this trick, which I like to call the tortilla flip, is because positioning your sprites on the pegboard can save your pegboard's durability, while also freeing up some space on your workbench. This is an easy way to center simple, one-panel patterns without having to move your beads one by one. Let's imagine you're working on a bigger sprite than this, and just by accident you leave out an arm, a leg, or just a few rows of beads outside your pegboard. Instead of using another pegboard to finish your sprite, what you can do is carefully place another pegboard on top of your sprite. Make sure each bead has a peg from your second pegboard in it, so that when you flip it, they won't fall off. Make a little bit of pressure and carefully flip it with both of your hands, and voila! Your pattern has been centered. Flip it once if your sprite is symmetrical, or if you'd like to flip your design horizontally. Flip it twice if you'd like to keep your sprite's original orientation. The spots in this mushroom are not symmetrical, so we're gonna have to flip it one more time. And there we have it! Now let's talk about ironing styles, and we're going to use our red mushroom to explain the half melt or round melt. By the way, that's not an official name, it's just what I like to call it, but let's talk about the basic steps. Whether it's parchment paper or the original ironing paper from Perler, the first thing you need to do is mark the side of the paper that is going to touch your iron. Simply write this side up on a corner so you can remember every time when you iron your sprites. As you reuse your ironing sheets, they will gradually become darker or browner, and if you use that side of the sheet face down, your sprites might end up looking dirty. So make sure your paper has an ironing side so this doesn't happen to you. This step is just as important as the rest of them. Place the ironing paper on top of your design, but try to avoid ironing the folds of the paper. Those lines will stay in your final sprite, so if you absolutely must iron over the folds, make it so that the creases are placed in dark lines of beads, or in areas where lines would normally go, like the waist or neck of a person or the horizon line of a landscape. Now we're gonna set our iron to medium temperature. In my case, my Black & Decker has 6 levels, and I normally iron my sprites on level 4. But because we don't want to overmelt our design, I'm gonna set it on level 3. By the way, to all of you parents out there, you do not need a dedicated iron for this hobby. All you need to do is set the steam to off, otherwise the steam will ruin your ironing paper. Ideally, if you could use an iron without water, that would be better, and it would also give your wrist a break. Place the hot iron on your design and leave it there for about 10 seconds. Lift the iron and check if the beads are fusing together. You'll know when they're melting because they stick to the paper and become more visible. Making a little bit of pressure, make circles around your sprite to make sure the beads melt evenly. And if you still have a few beads that aren't visible, use the tip of your iron to melt them with the rest of the beads. And here's my favorite technique, the half and half. Once you make sure the sprite has been fused evenly, you can simply lift the ironing paper, remove the pegboard, put down your sprite and continue ironing your design. This will prevent your pegboard from overheating and bending out of shape, but you also won't have to use the masking tape method. And this is what I would call a half melt sprite. You can stop ironing once you know all the beads in your design have been fused properly without sealing the holes. Personally, I would rather iron this sprite all the way through so that it looks a bit more square and flat, but there are benefits to ironing your sprites half melt. If you're working on a special project like the squirrel bracelet or any other sprite that requires a curved design, half melting your sprite will give it that extra flexibility you need. This Goron bracelet was fully ironed on one side, but it would be a lot more flexible if it had been half ironed. Having said that, if you want to iron a curved piece on both sides, you can still do it, but it will be a bit more difficult since your sprite will be stiff and barely flexible. If you keep bending the piece while it cools, you will get that curved design without a problem. Once you finish ironing your sprite, find the heaviest book you've got and place it on top of your sprite. This will let your sprite cool off while keeping it flat. Let it rest for 5 minutes and your sprite will be ready. I will now show you the full melt or square melt using our green mushroom as an example. Before showing you how it looks, it's time we talked about the infamous masking tape method. The Newman to my Seinfeld, the Dr. Wily to my Mega Man, you get it. I just don't like it. Now the process is simple, but just as time consuming as a chess match and Morse code. Cut a piece of masking tape, but make sure it is just as wide as your sprite. Place the strips of masking tape on your sprite one by one, making sure they overlap a little bit. This will make the process of removing the masking tape a lot easier later on. Once you've completely covered your sprite with masking tape, use a pencil, a remote control, or pretty much anything you can find to rub against your sprite. Doing this ensures your beads will remain stuck to the tape while you remove the sprite from the pegboard. Now carefully lift the sides of the paper, put away your pegboard, and flip your sprite. The next step might be a bit difficult on bigger sprites, but you'll need to cut the extra pieces of masking tape on your design in order to iron it. Just grab your scissors or cutting knife and cut around your sprite. This prevents the ironing paper from sticking to the masking tape. In larger sprites, you may have to punch a hole on the tape for each bead with a needle in order to let the air from the beads find a way to escape. This is one of the main reasons why I don't like the masking tape method, especially if you're making several sprites in a row. The method I'm going to show you next is a combination between the masking tape method and the half and half. Our green mushroom has been partially ironed on one side, but since the other side is covered with masking tape, the air inside the beads has nowhere to go. As mentioned before, if you don't poke holes on the masking tape, this tends to create bubbles. Instead of doing that, we can remove the masking tape once we know our sprites have been partially ironed. Now all we need to do is continue ironing it until our design has no holes in it and all the beads have been melted properly. Bear in mind that most of the time going for the full melt will mean that one side will look better than the other. Here we have both of our mushrooms side by side so you can see the difference. We used the half melt on our red mushroom using simple techniques, and then we tried the full melt on our green mushroom, this time using the masking tape method. I have to say, no style or technique is better than the other. It all depends on how you want your sprites to look when they're done, and how safe you feel when you're ironing sprites. Most bead spriters I know feel safer using the masking tape method, but to me it's too much time invested on small sprites. I would highly recommend going for the half melt if you're working on 3D projects like this companion cube, since it's easier to snap the sides in place when all the beads are still round. I hope this tutorial helps you understand the ironing process a little better, and if you're not new to Perler sprites, I hope it shows you different ways to do it. Feel free to leave a comment below with your ironing preferences and tag me on Twitter if you'd like to show me what you've made. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll be uploading more tutorials and crafting time lapses soon.